Diane is 67. Every Sunday, she cooks a big batch of rice and chicken enough for the whole week and reheats a portion each night in the microwave. It's efficient, it saves money, and she's done it for years without a second thought. But there's something about reheating specific foods that almost nobody explains clearly, and it matters more after 60 than it did in your 30s. This isn't about throwing out your leftovers or living in fear of your own refrigerator. It's about understanding a handful of specific mechanisms that scientists and physicians have studied for years, so you can make small, informed adjustments instead of continuing habits that have quietly built up over a lifetime without anyone ever explaining the reasoning behind them. Your body at this stage of life processes things differently than it did 30 years ago. Liver enzymes slow down, kidney filtration rate drops, and the gut lining becomes more permeable, meaning substances your body could shrug off easily in your 30s can now sit around longer, doing more damage before they're cleared out. Today, I'll walk you through 7 everyday foods that deserve a second look before you reheat them again, plus the 4 simple habits that make reheating safe for everything else in your fridge. Quick note before we start. This is general health education, not medical advice if you have specific digestive or immune concerns. Talk to your doctor about what applies to you. Now here's the first one, and it might surprise you. Rice, plain white rice, the most common side dish on the planet, becomes a genuine concern the moment it sits at room temperature for more than an hour before you refrigerate it. Here's why. Raw rice can carry spores of a bacterium called Bacillus cereus. Cooking kills the active bacteria, but the spores can survive the heat. If cooked rice is left out on the counter, those spores wake up and multiply, releasing a toxin as they go. The dangerous part is that this toxin is heat stable. Reheating the rice the next day doesn't destroy it. You can heat it to a boil, and the toxin is still there. For someone over 60 with a slower gut and a less resilient immune system, this isn't just an upset stomach. It can trigger vomiting and diarrhea severe enough to cause dangerous dehydration. The fix: cool your rice within 1 hour of cooking, refrigerate it in a sealed container, and never let it sit out overnight before reheating it the next day. It's worth pointing out just how common this specific mistake is. Rice is one of the most frequently meal prep foods in the world, precisely because it reheats so easily and keeps for days. That convenience is exactly why this particular risk goes unnoticed for so long. Nothing about spoiled rice looks or smells obviously wrong at first glance, which makes it very different from more obvious spoilage cues people are used to watching for. The second food might surprise you even more: spinach, along with other leafy greens like beet greens and celery. These vegetables are naturally high in nitrates, and nitrates themselves aren't the problem. They're actually linked to healthy blood pressure and blood flow. The issue happens when you cook spinach, let it cool, and then reheat it, especially more than once. Repeated heating converts some of those nitrates into nitrites and nitrites, particularly when combined with proteins at high heat, can form compounds called nitrosamines, which have been studied for their link to increased cancer risk with significant repeated exposure over time. To be clear, this isn't advice to fear spinach. It's one of the healthiest vegetables you can eat. The advice is to cook only what you plan to eat that day, and if you do have leftover greens, reheat them only once, briefly, rather than warming the same batch across several days. This is a good moment to mention that the dose and frequency genuinely matter here. Occasionally reheating spinach once isn't the same risk profile as a household habit of cooking a large pot of greens on Sunday and reheating the same batch 4 or 5 times throughout the week. It's the repeated, cumulative pattern that researchers have focused on, not a single occasional exception. Third, chicken. Reheating chicken itself isn't dangerous, but reheating it incorrectly is one of the most common mistakes in any kitchen. When chicken is cooled and then reheated at a lower temperature or for a shorter time than needed, it becomes harder for your digestive system to break down properly, and undercooked reheating increases the risk of bacterial survival, particularly Salmonella and Campylobacter, which don't always get neutralized if the chicken is only warmed rather than heated all the way through. This matters more after 60, since stomach acid production, which helps neutralize some of these bacteria, typically decreases with age. The recommendation is precise. Reheat chicken until it reaches an internal temperature of at least 165 degrees Fahrenheit all the way to the center, and ideally only reheat it once. After that, it's safer to discard leftovers than to reheat them again. A simple, practical tip here: an inexpensive kitchen thermometer removes all the guesswork. Rather than estimating by touch or by how long something has been in the microwave, checking the actual internal temperature at the thickest part of the chicken takes the uncertainty out of the equation entirely, and it's a one-time purchase that pays for itself many times over in peace of mind alone. Fourth, cooking oil, specifically oil that's already been used once for frying and then reused for a second or third round. This is common in households that fry foods regularly. Every time oil is heated to a high frying temperature, it begins breaking down at the molecular level, and reheating that same oil accelerates the breakdown, producing compounds called aldehydes and polar compounds. Research on repeatedly heated cooking oils has linked high exposure to these breakdown compounds with increased oxidative stress, one of the key biological processes tied to accelerated aging and increased cancer risk. Since your cell's capacity to repair oxidative damage naturally declines with age, minimizing this exposure is one of the simplest protective changes available. The rule: use oil once for high heat frying, then either discard it or repurpose it only for very low, gentle reheating, never for another round of deep frying. One sign worth watching for: oil that has darkened significantly, developed a strong odor, or become noticeably thicker after use has already broken down more than it should have, and reusing it again compounds that break down further. A fresh batch of oil is inexpensive compared to the cumulative exposure of repeatedly reheating the same oil over months or years. Fifth, processed and cured meat bacon, sausages, hot dogs, deli meats when reheated at high temperatures in a pan or under a broiler. These meats already contain nitrates and nitrites as preservatives. When reheated a second time at high heat, the likelihood of nitrosamine formation increases further, with an added layer of risk since these meats are also high in saturated fat, which can compound inflammation. Processed meat has already been classified as a Category 1 carcinogen based on population-level evidence linking regular consumption to colorectal cancer risk. If you enjoy these foods occasionally, the advice isn't to eliminate them completely, it's to reheat them gently at lower temperatures rather than crisping them a second time under high heat. A gentle reheating method, like a covered pan on low heat or a brief stint in the microwave rather than a hot skillet or broiler, accomplishes the same goal of making the food warm and enjoyable without pushing it through another high heat cycle that accelerates compound formation. Sixth, and this one catches almost everyone off guard: potatoes, specifically ones that have been cooked, cooled, and left at room temperature before reheating. Potatoes are low acid and high moisture, creating a perfect environment for a bacteria called Clostridium botulinum to grow if the potato is wrapped in foil or sealed in an airtight container while still warm and left out for several hours. This bacterium thrives in low oxygen environments, exactly what a foil-wrapped baked potato creates. It produces a toxin that can affect the nervous system, and while cases are rare, they're serious. And older adults with underlying nerve or muscle conditions are more vulnerable. The safe habit: never leave cooked potatoes wrapped or sealed at room temperature for more than 2 hours, and refrigerate them promptly, uncovered at first. This one surprises people specifically because potatoes feel like the safest, most humble food in the kitchen. There's nothing about a baked potato that looks risky sitting on the counter, which is exactly why this particular mechanism, tied entirely to the low oxygen environment created by foil wrapping, tends to fly under the radar in most household food safety conversations. There's a seventh food worth a quick mention too: eggs. Particularly hard-boiled eggs and egg-based dishes like frittata or quiche reheated in the microwave. Eggs are a wonderful source of protein, especially important for maintaining muscle mass as you get older. But reheating egg dishes at very high microwave power can overcook the proteins unevenly, creating a rubbery texture that's genuinely harder to digest. More importantly, if egg dishes sit at room temperature too long before refrigeration, they can support salmonella growth. And microwaves are notorious for creating hot spots and cold spots in the same dish, meaning part of a reheated egg casserole can be steaming hot while another section stays lukewarm, harboring live bacteria the whole time. The fix is simple: stir egg-based leftovers partway through reheating, or use lower power for a longer stretch, so heat distributes evenly instead of scorching one section while leaving another cold. Now here's the good news, because this video isn't meant to make you afraid of your own kitchen. Reheating food is not inherently dangerous, and for the vast majority of meals, it's completely safe and even necessary for reducing food waste. Rice, chicken, vegetables, and potatoes can all be reheated safely as long as you follow 4 simple habits that matter more than any single food on this list. The first habit is speed of cooling. Never let cooked food sit at room temperature for more than 1 to 2 hours before refrigerating. Bacteria and toxin formation both accelerate the longer food stays in what's called the temperature danger zone, between 40 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Dividing large batches into smaller, shallow containers before refrigerating helps enormously, since a shallow layer cools far faster than one large, deep pot sitting in the fridge. The second habit is reheating only once. Take out only the portion you plan to eat, reheat that fully, and avoid reheating the same large batch multiple times across several days. Every additional cycle of cooling and reheating gives bacteria another opportunity to multiply and gives heat-sensitive compounds another opportunity to break down into byproducts your body would rather not deal with. If you cook a large meal on a Sunday, consider portioning it into individual containers right away, so each day you're only reheating what you actually need, rather than repeatedly warming and cooling the entire pot. The third habit is reheating to full temperature, not just until food feels warm, but until it's steaming hot all the way through. This is especially important with microwaves, which heat unevenly by nature. Stirring food halfway through, letting it rest a minute so heat distributes, and checking that the center is as hot as the edges make a genuine difference. The fourth habit is trusting your senses. If reheated food smells sour, looks slimy, or has an unusual film on the surface, no amount of reheating makes it safe again. Heat can kill many bacteria, but it doesn't reliably destroy every toxin those bacteria may have already produced. When in doubt, the safest choice is always to throw it out. Let me tell you what happened with Diane, the woman from the beginning of this video. After learning about the rice and chicken mechanism specifically, she didn't stop meal prepping, she just changed how she did it. Instead of one large pot reheated across the whole week, she started portioning meals into individual containers immediately after cooking, refrigerating everything within the hour, and reheating each portion only once, fully, nothing about her weekly routine actually got harder. It just got a little more deliberate. She told me the biggest shift wasn't even the extra effort it was, simply knowing why she was doing it, rather than following food safety advice she'd half remembered from somewhere without ever understanding the actual reasoning behind it. For someone over 60, these habits matter more than they did in your younger years, simply because your body's margin for error has narrowed. Your immune response is slightly slower, your gut microbiome is less resilient, and your liver and kidneys, which clear out toxins and byproducts, are working with less reserve capacity than they used to. None of this means fearing your own leftovers. It means a few small adjustments in how you cool, store, and reheat food can meaningfully reduce your long-term exposure to compounds researchers have studied for decades in relation to cancer risk and digestive health. It's also worth remembering that no single meal determines your health outcome. These patterns matter over years and decades, not from one reheated plate of rice or one extra day of leftovers. The goal here isn't anxiety around ordinary meals. It's the same practical awareness a cancer doctor would want their own parents to have, so your kitchen habits work quietly in your favor rather than against you, without you ever having to think about it consciously once the new pattern becomes routine. To recap quickly, rice, spinach and leafy greens, chicken, reused cooking oil, processed meat, potatoes, and egg dishes are the 7 foods worth handling a little more carefully, not avoiding, just cooling quickly, reheating only once, heating fully through, and trusting your senses when something seems off. None of these foods need to disappear from your kitchen. They just deserve a little more attention than they've probably been getting. If this video helped you, please consider liking it and subscribing to Longevity Insight. We publish videos exactly like this every week. And I'd like to know, which of these 7 foods surprised you most? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and it genuinely shapes what we cover next. Thank you for watching, and here's to a healthier kitchen, one small habit at a time.